The trade station Epsilon 7 floated in silent orbit above a burning red gas giant. The planet below shimmered like molten glass, throwing crimson light through the station's metal corridors. Thousands of aliens filled the passageways, some tall and scaled, others covered in fur or shimmering membranes. Every species here had come to witness the same thing, the first major human diplomatic negotiation in galactic history. And everyone whispered the same word when they saw the human delegation pass. Deathworlders. To most aliens, that word carried a chill. A Deathworlder was a creature that evolved on a planet too violent, too deadly, too unpredictable for life. But somehow humans had not only survived on such a planet, they had thrived. Now they were here, wearing suits instead of armor, carrying data pads instead of rifles. And for many watching, that made them even more dangerous. Ambassador Kim De-jo led the human delegation through the station's main corridor. He was tall and calm, his dark hair trimmed neatly, his steps measured and silent. His eyes, however, were those of a soldier, constantly scanning, calculating, reading every detail of the world around him. De-jo had fought in 3 wars before he ever learned how to negotiate peace. Now he was called a diplomat. But deep inside, the soldier was still there. Behind him walked Lee Subin, a soft-spoken anthropologist with kind eyes, clutching her tablet. She had spent years studying alien cultures and believed diplomacy could erase fear. Beside her was Park Min-yu, a security officer built like a wall, silent and alert, his uniform pressed so tight it almost looked military. Then came Cho Jae-woo, communications expert, calm, steady, always watching, always recording. The 4 humans walked in quiet formation, ignoring the stares. Subin noticed how the aliens moved aside, clearing a path as if by instinct. Even without weapons, humans carried something heavy with them, something predatory. At the end of the corridor stood a circular door, marked with the symbols of the Galactic Trade Council. Waiting beyond it was the meeting that would decide the fate of human expansion in this sector. Inside, the conference room was vast and bright, shaped like a ring with a long oval table in the center. Screens around the walls displayed star maps and mining sectors. Holographic displays hovered in the air, showing charts, territories, and planetary data. At the head of the table stood Ambassador Quindar, an insectoid being with 4 arms and large, glassy eyes that shimmered green under the lights. He greeted the humans warmly, bowing slightly. "Welcome to Epsilon 7, Quindar said in perfect English. "We are honored by your presence. We hope today's discussions lead to prosperity for all." "Thank you, Ambassador," De-jo replied, bowing politely. "We seek cooperation, not conflict." The words were simple, but every alien in the room knew how much weight they carried. For years, humanity had been seen as a curiosity, primitive, reckless, unpredictable. Their worlds were rough, their ships crude, their tempers infamous. But Earth had resources that no one else had, minerals that only Deathworld pressure could forge. And now the humans wanted to trade them. For the first hour, the meeting went smoothly. Subin presented data on rare crystalline deposits. Cho Jae-woo translated trade terms for the delegates. Even Park Min-yu, standing silently by the wall, looked almost relaxed. Then the room grew quiet. The last delegation had arrived. The hegemony. The doors opened, and a massive figure entered, a reptilian creature nearly 8 feet tall, scales dark green and eyes like molten gold. His presence changed the atmosphere immediately. Commander Velak, supreme negotiator of the hegemony fleet. Every alien at the table seemed to shift uncomfortably. Velak's people were known for arrogance, cruelty, and military power. And Velak was the worst of them. "So," he said, his voice like grinding metal, "these are the famous Deathworlders." He looked over the humans slowly, his gaze dripping with disdain. "They look smaller than I expected." De-jo rose slightly from his chair and nodded. "Commander Velak, I presume, thank you for joining us." "Joining you?" Velak's laugh was low and cold. "No, human, you join us. This station is hegemony territory." Subin, ever the diplomat, stepped forward with her data tablet. "We're grateful to the hegemony for hosting. Our surveys show these mining sectors can benefit everyone." "Crystals from a death trap of a planet," Velak interrupted, sneering. "How fitting." Subin hesitated, but her tone stayed calm. Our materials are pure and stable. The environment that formed them ensures. Enough, Velak said, slamming a clawed hand on the table. Tell me, human, how many of your kind die each year just from living on that nightmare you call a homeworld? The room went silent. Subin swallowed. Earth has its dangers, yes, but they've made us strong. We adapt. Velak's yellow eyes narrowed. Adapt? You mean survive like beasts? Dejoe's jaw tightened. He didn't move, didn't speak. Only his eyes flicked toward Park Minu, who subtly shifted his weight. Commander, Ambassador Quindar said carefully, perhaps we should. Velak raised a claw. Do not interrupt me, Bug. His gaze turned back to Dejoe. Your people are violent, uncivilized. You fight each other constantly. Even your peace talks begin in blood. Tell me, is that what you want to spread to the galaxy? Dejoe finally spoke, his voice quiet and even. Commander, our history is not perfect, but we've learned from it. We don't seek war. Velak leaned closer. Don't you? Because where I come from, predators never change. His words hung in the air like a toxin. Some of the alien delegates shifted uneasily, others whispered. They'd heard stories, humans fighting wars on lava worlds, surviving toxins, enduring radiation that killed other species instantly. To them, this confrontation felt like watching a volcano tremble before eruption. Subin spoke again, trying to pull the conversation back. Perhaps we could return to the terms of the... Velak snapped. Do you always send prey to do your speaking, or are your soldiers hiding behind you? Dejoe's head tilted slightly. The calm mask never left his face, but the air around him felt heavier. Subin felt it too. She'd seen that look once, on a wildlife documentary from Earth just before a tiger leaped. Commander, she said softly, please, enough. Velak smiled, a cruel, toothy grin. Oh, I'm just getting started. He stood, his shadow stretching across the table. You come here begging for legitimacy, but your species doesn't belong among civilized worlds. You belong in cages, back on your death planet where you can kill each other in peace. The room froze. No one spoke. Even the ambient hum of the station seemed to fade. Park Minu's hand drifted subtly toward his holster. Cho Jaiwoo's eyes widened, her hand resting on the small recording device at her belt. Subin's breath hitched. Velak leaned forward until his face was inches from Dejoe's. Stand up when I talk to you, animal. He raised one massive, clawed hand, then brought it down hard across Dejoe's face. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Blood streaked across the metal table. For a long, impossible second, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Velak stepped back, admiring his work. There, he said mockingly, now you look like what you really are, a beaten animal. Dejoe slowly turned his head back to face him. Blood dripped from his cheek onto his crisp diplomatic uniform. His expression didn't change. But his eyes became something else. Cold, focused. Ancient. In those eyes, Velak saw a flash of something older than civilization, something born from a world that killed without mercy. He didn't know it yet, but he had just crossed a line no being in the galaxy would ever cross again. Dejoe spoke softly. That was a mistake. The room was utterly silent. Even the station's air recyclers seemed to pause. The only sound was the slow, rhythmic drip of blood sliding off Dejoe's chin onto the polished conference table. Every being in that room, every alien diplomat, every aide, every guard knew something had changed. Something invisible had snapped. Commander Velak straightened, his scales glinting under the overhead light. What? He sneered. No response, no courage left, Deathworlder. He didn't understand. He thought he had humiliated a man. He had no idea he had just awakened a predator. Dr. Yun Haywin watched from the observation deck aboard the human diplomatic vessel, her eyes wide as the live feed played. The blow landed, the blood fell, and she felt her stomach twist. He's entering combat mode, she whispered. Her assistant blinked. Combat mode, but he's a diplomat. Yun's voice was quiet, grim. No, he's human. She reached for the intercom, but it was too late. The next 5 seconds would be recorded from a dozen angles, analyzed by hundreds of militaries, studied by billions. It would be replayed, slowed down, enhanced, dissected. Because in those 5 seconds, the galaxy finally understood what it meant to provoke a species that survived on a world of death. Second 1. Dejoe's body moved before thought. Years of training, muscle memory, reflexes honed in chaos, all of it ignited at once. He stood so fast his chair clattered backward. His right hand snatched the ceremonial blade from Velak's belt before the alien even realized what was happening. The movement was so clean, so controlled, that it almost looked choreographed. From the security deck, Chief Brentok shouted into his communicator, "Lock the chamber now." But it was already too late. Second 2. Dejoe pivoted on one heel, body low, motion fluid. Velak's clawed hand was only halfway to his own weapon. The human was already inside his reach. Observers would later describe this second as impossible. Biologists would claim that no creature from a high-gravity world could move like that. But Deathworlders were not bound by ordinary limits. They were creatures that had evolved by outrunning extinction itself. Dejoe's left hand slammed into Velak's wrist, twisting the alien's arm outward with mechanical precision. The commander roared in pain, the sound echoed like thunder. Subin gasped. Park Minu was already in motion, stepping smoothly between Dejoe and the approaching alien guards. He didn't draw his weapon. He didn't have to. One look into his eyes and they froze. Second 3. Velak stumbled backward, clutching his broken wrist. Dejoe rose from his crouch, the stolen sword gleaming in his hand. To most aliens, the weapon was ceremonial, a symbol of authority. To a human soldier, it was simply a tool, a sharpened length of metal. And in the right hands, a tool becomes lethal. Dejoe, stop, Ambassador Quindar shouted, his mandibles shaking. This can still be resolved. Dejoe didn't look at him. His focus was absolute, his breathing calm. Every calculation happened behind those blood-dark eyes. Distance, angle, trajectory, armor density, bone structure. 1,000 instincts firing in perfect synchronization. Velak's survival time could now be measured in heartbeats. Second 4. Velak raised his remaining hand, reaching for his communicator, gasping for help. Security. Dejoe was already there. He slipped behind the alien commander like liquid shadow, one arm looping around the thick-scaled neck, pulling him off balance. The blade's edge rested just below the jaw. Every alien delegate froze in place. The air turned heavy, electric. Even the security doors hesitated, their motors whining as if they too were afraid. "You wanted to cage my people," Dejoe whispered, his tone disturbingly calm. His voice carried across the room, soft yet clear, the kind of voice predators use before the strike. "Did you really think there would be no consequences?" Velak's eyes bulged with disbelief, his throat pulsing against the cold edge of the blade. He tried to speak, tried to plead, but only a strangled gasp escaped. Across the table, Subin's hands shook, her tablet trembling in her grip. She had spent her life studying alien cultures, believing in dialogue, in peace, in understanding. But this was humanity's oldest language. The language of survival. Second 5. The blade moved. A single clean motion. No wasted energy, no hesitation. The sword sliced through the commander's neck with surgical precision. For a heartbeat, Velak's body remained upright. Then his head dropped, rolling across the floor with a hollow clink as it came to rest against the base of the table. Blood sprayed across the polished metal tiles, a dark crimson wave that caught the light like spilled wine. Then silence. The entire galaxy seemed to stop breathing. Dejoe stood still, blade dripping, expression perfectly neutral. He set the weapon gently on the table, wiped his hand with the edge of his sleeve, and adjusted his tie. Then he looked around the room. Every alien at that table, every diplomat, every observer, saw something terrifying in that calm human face. Not madness, not rage. Control. A predator that kills only when it must. A creature that understands violence so deeply, it can wield it like a surgeon wields a scalpel. "Now then," Dejoe said softly, his voice steady. Does anyone else have concerns about the mining rights proposal? No one spoke. No one moved. Even the station's AI hesitated before unlocking the doors for the incoming security squad. When they burst into the room, they stopped cold, staring at the headless body, the spreading pool of blood, and the human diplomat standing over it like a calm executioner. Ambassador Quindar's mandibles clicked uncontrollably. There's been an incident. Dejo interrupted, tone polite, measured. Commander Velak attacked a diplomatic representative without provocation. I defended myself under Article 7 of the Human Diplomatic Code. The insectoid ambassador blinked. Article 7. Subin, her voice trembling but clear, read from her tablet. Any physical assault on a human representative during official negotiations is considered an act of war and may be responded to with appropriate force. Appropriate force, muttered Quindar, glancing at the corpse. Yes, I see. Park Minyu and Cho Jaiwoo moved quietly around the room, ensuring every alien delegate's recording device had captured the same thing, every frame, every angle. There would be no denying what had happened. No lies. No cover-ups. Only truth and blood. From her ship, Dr. Yun Haewon exhaled slowly. It's done, she whispered. Her assistant stared at the screen in horror. He just killed a commander in front of half the galaxy. Yun nodded and saved a war. Within minutes, the footage spread through secure channels. Then through the media. Then through every communication network in known space. By the 6th hour, every government, every military, every intelligence agency had a copy. It became the most studied 5 seconds in galactic history. Those who hated humanity called it proof of barbarism. Those who respected them called it a reminder. But everyone agreed on one thing. From that day on, no one would ever again mistake a human's calm for weakness. It took 6 hours for the footage to cross the stars. Faster-than-light communication had carried news before, but never like this. The 5 seconds of perfect, efficient violence, of a human diplomat turning a negotiation into an execution, spread across the galaxy faster than rumor, faster than fear itself. Every major government, military command, and media network now had it. Every leader was watching the same moment in silence. The footage began with an insult. It ended with a head rolling across the floor. And between those 2 points of time, the galaxy's understanding of humanity changed forever. The Outer Rim. On the edge of explored space, inside a massive warship called Iron Dawn, Admiral Song Bung-ho stood at the viewport, the stars reflecting in his eyes. His aide, Lieutenant Kang, handed him a data pad with trembling hands. Sir, you need to see this immediately. The Admiral didn't reply, he simply pressed play. He watched the 5-second clip 3 times, once as a soldier, once as a strategist, and once as a human. When it ended, he placed the pad down quietly and looked out at the distant stars. How is the diplomatic team? He asked finally. Safe, sir. Station security confirmed it was classified as self-defense. Ambassador Dejo remains on Epsilon 7 under protection. Any demands for his arrest? Several, Kang said softly, but most governments are reconsidering. Song exhaled. That word, reconsidering, was an understatement. Across the galaxy, alien military leaders were having the same conversation, the same realization. They had underestimated the Deathworlders. The Zenturi Defense Command. Deep within the Zenturi homeworld's mountain fortress, General Takmor stared at the footage frozen on his screen. The image showed Dejo's hand wrapped around Velak's throat, the blade flashing mid-swing. Every detail, every pixel was burned into his mind. He turned toward his intelligence chief, a being with translucent skin and eyes like liquid mercury. You're telling me, Takmor said slowly, we've classified humans as a moderate threat for the past decade. Yes, sir, the intelligence chief stammered, based on their population size and limited technology. And now, the alien hesitated, tentacles quivered. We recommend immediate reclassification to extreme threat, possibly higher. Takmor frowned, higher than extreme. We may need to invent a new category. The media frenzy. Across 50 sectors, the same footage played on news screens in 1,000 different languages. The headlines varied, but the meaning was the same. Human diplomat EXECUTES commander in self-defense. The 5 seconds that changed the galaxy. DATHWRLDRS strike back. Insectoid anchors clicked their mandibles in disbelief. Amphibian journalists hissed in awe. The incident became the most analyzed event in history. Frame by frame, motion by motion, alien experts tried to understand how a primitive human could move like that. Some blamed genetics, others said cybernetic implants. One broadcast host whispered, "Maybe that's just what they are." But no matter the opinion, one thing was clear. Nobody would ever treat humans the same again. The hegemony homeworld. In the war palace of the High Archon Meleros, the air was thick with tension. The massive reptilian leader sat at the head of a grand stone table, his scaled claws tapping slowly. For over 2 centuries, he had ruled through fear, but he had never seen fear quite like this. Before him stood his generals and ministers. On the main screen, the footage replayed once again, Dejo's clean, unflinching strike. Melero's slitted eyes narrowed. "Explain to me," he growled, voice echoing through the chamber, "how one human killed our most experienced field commander with his own weapon." Silence. Finally, War Marshal Hector, Velak's superior, cleared his throat. "My lord, our analysis suggests extensive combat training, possibly Special Forces background." "Special Forces?" Meleros repeated. His voice was calm, but the floor trembled with every word. "And we sent Velak to negotiate with Special Forces soldiers pretending to be diplomats. We didn't know, my lord. Their credentials listed them as trade representatives." Defense Minister Routh added, "Apparently, among humans, there's little difference. Our intelligence indicates that most human diplomats have military experience, something about their homeworld requiring survival skills." Meleros stared at the reports on the table. Tactical maps of human colonies, military readiness charts, shipping routes. All of it painted a picture his empire had refused to see. "How many ships do they have?" he asked finally. "Approximately 300 vessels of various classes, my lord." 300? Meleros' eyes glowed faintly. "And how many of those ships are crewed by beings who can do this?" No one answered. The trade network. Within hours, galactic commerce shifted in ways unseen for centuries. Trade routes that had once banned human ships were now offering premium contracts to hire them. Convoys that had previously ignored Earth's colonies suddenly begged for Deathworlder escorts. Pirates who had hunted human freighters mysteriously changed targets overnight. The galaxy was realigning itself, not by treaties, not by laws, but by fear. And for once, fear worked in humanity's favor. Earth. In the capital dome of New Seoul, President Kang Jae-min sat in her private office, the soft hum of hollow screens surrounding her. Dozens of reports flowed in, economic boosts, trade requests, military invitations. She patched into a secure call with human colonies spread across the stars. The faces of governors and administrators flickered on screen. "President Kang," said Governor Imna Young from the Kepler system. "Trade agreements that were stalled for years are being signed overnight. Everyone wants a piece of our supply chain." "Defense pacts, too," added Governor Lee from Ross Colony. "They're offering us deals we never dreamed of getting." Kang leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing. "And the cost?" Imna hesitated. "Just one thing, they want assurances." "Assurances?" "That we'll remember who our friends are." The president smiled faintly. "I think we can arrange that." Epsilon 7. Back on the trade station where it all began, the negotiations had quietly resumed. The same conference table, now spotless, the floor scrubbed free of blood, sat surrounded by nervous alien delegates. Velak's seat remained empty. Ambassador Dejo sat at the head of the table, calm and immaculate in a fresh uniform. The small cut on his cheek had been sealed with medical gel. His voice was polite, controlled, human. "The mining rights proposal," he said, "seems beneficial to all parties. Shall we finalize the agreement?" No one hesitated this time. "I see no objections," said Representative Vexani of the Traders Coalition, his voice trembling. Approved, said the new hegemony representative, a much younger officer, careful not to meet Dejoe's eyes. Full access granted, added another delegate quickly. Every species in that room had learned a simple truth. You do not argue with a Deathworlder. Subin took notes quietly, her fingers steady again, but inside she felt a chill. 12 hours ago, these same beings had mocked humanity. Now they hung on every word her team spoke. She looked at Dejoe, the calm, polite, terrifying man who had just rewritten galactic diplomacy. For the first time, she wasn't sure whether to feel proud or afraid. When the session ended, Dejoe stood and offered a polite bow. "Thank you for your cooperation," he said evenly. "I believe this arrangement will benefit everyone involved." No one dared disagree. As he and his team left the chamber, the alien delegates whispered quietly among themselves. They didn't see diplomats. They saw predators in tailored uniforms, creatures from a nightmare planet who smiled like gentlemen and killed like ghosts. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity. And fear, as it turned out, was an excellent foundation for peace. The galaxy had changed overnight. Across the stars, alien newscasters spoke in hushed tones, analysts argued, and war councils whispered the same question. Who are these humans, really? They were traders, engineers, explorers, and killers. They smiled politely, offered handshakes, and built alliances with the same hands that could end a life in a heartbeat. The galaxy had met predators before, conquerors, tyrants, warmongers. But never had it met predators who preferred peace. Earth Presidential Command Dome, New Seoul. President Kang Jae-min stood before a glowing holographic display of the known galaxy. Thousands of blinking dots marked newly signed agreements, trade routes, defense treaties, mining contracts, all connected to one name, Earth. Her advisors surrounded her in a semicircle, speaking one after another. Ross and Kepler colonies report record trade surpluses. The Centauri Belt Syndicate wants to establish joint research stations. Half the rim worlds have offered diplomatic recognition to humanity. Kang raised a hand, and the others. A communications officer cleared his throat. The hegemony's response has been mixed, Madam President. Some demand justice for Commander Velak's death. Others are withdrawing their fleets from our borders. They're confused, frightened. Kang smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. They should be. Epsilon 7, observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass viewport. The gas giant below glowed like a smoldering ember, its storms swirling in slow motion. Lee Subin stood alone, watching the red light wash across her reflection. She hadn't slept in 30 hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that moment, Velak's body falling, the blade glinting, Dejoe's calm expression. Footsteps echoed softly behind her. Still awake, it was Dejoe, his voice quiet, polite as always. He approached slowly, his reflection joining hers in the glass. His cheek still bore a faint scar, a reminder of how the galaxy's new era had begun, with blood. I couldn't sleep, Subin admitted. You. He smiled slightly. Deathworld habit, we don't sleep easily when the room is quiet. She gave a tired laugh. You make it sound poetic. Dejoe's gaze shifted to the stars. Poetry is just truth dressed nicely. Subin hesitated, then spoke what had haunted her since the incident. Do you ever regret it? He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched. I regret that it was necessary, he said finally, but I don't regret surviving. Subin looked at him sharply. That's what frightens them, you know, the way you say it, the way all of us act. You kill a commander in 5 seconds and then you speak like nothing happened. Would you prefer I scream? Dejoe asked softly. She turned away. No, but I'd like to know if the galaxy will ever see us as more than predators. Dejoe's expression softened. They'll see, eventually, but first they have to believe we can kill them. HoloNet broadcast, Galactic Prime News. A familiar voice clicked through 1,000 speakers across 50 systems. This is Zakara Ven, Galactic Prime News. In today's analysis, we discuss what experts are calling the Deathworld effect. Zakara, an insectoid journalist with silver eyes and a graceful presence, stared into the camera with quiet fascination. For centuries, the galaxy considered Earth a fringe species, resourceful, emotional, occasionally violent, but ultimately harmless. The incident on Trade Station Epsilon 7 has shattered that illusion. In 5 seconds, humanity demonstrated what many feared, that they are both capable of diplomacy and destruction. Her wings flickered briefly under the studio lights. But here's the question no one is asking. Are they monsters or are they teachers? The footage played behind her, slow motion frame by frame. Djo moving, the blade flashing, the calm after the storm. Notice his expression, no fury, no joy, only focus. To them, violence is not passion, it's discipline. The segment became one of the most rewatched broadcasts in Galactic history. Human Embassy, Arcani's system. The Human Embassy was a simple structure of steel and glass, built in the heart of a city where alien diplomats once mocked humanity's ugly architecture. Now, the same officials crossed the embassy's threshold with trembling politeness. Djo stood by the entry hall, shaking hands with alien envoys. His posture was calm, his tone measured, but every creature that met his gaze felt it, the quiet reminder of what he had done. "Ambassador," said a tall, translucent being named Malek, bowing deeply. "Our council would like to extend trade protections for your colonies, permanent ones." "That's generous," Djo said. Malek's voice quivered. "We believe in peace, strong peace." Djo nodded, masking his amusement. "Peace enforced by memory, I understand." When Malek left, Subin approached, watching him from the doorway. "You realize they're not offering friendship," she said. "They're offering obedience." Djo's answer was simple. Sometimes obedience is the first step toward respect. The hegemony's war room. While half the galaxy courted humanity's favor, the hegemony seethed. In a vast subterranean chamber lit by blue fire, High Archon Meleros sat upon his throne of polished obsidian. His eyes blazed with fury as his ministers presented reports. "Our colonies on the frontier are in revolt," one officer croaked. "Our allies are breaking treaties." "Because they're afraid," another shouted. "They saw that footage, they think the humans are gods." Meleros slammed his clawed fist down, cracking the table. "They are animals. We will remind the galaxy who rules." A hush fell over the chamber. "Prepare our fleets," Meleros commanded. "If they will not fear us, they will burn with us." War Marshal Hector hesitated. "My lord, we're not ready for open conflict. Their diplomats have." "Then we end the diplomacy," Meleros snarled. "If one human diplomat can start a storm, imagine what a fleet of them could do." He looked at the screen again, Djo's cold eyes staring back from the replay. The Archon's scales shivered. For the first time in 200 years, he felt something he did not recognize. Not anger. Not hatred. Doubt. Zakara's interview. The journalist Zakara sat across from Subin in a quiet studio on Epsilon 7. Cameras hummed, recording in dozens of wavelengths. "Dr. Subin," Zakara began gently, "you've become the voice of reason among humans. Some call you the conscience of your species." Subin smiled weakly. "I'm not sure I deserve that." "Tell me," Zakara continued, her mandibles twitching with curiosity, "do humans always respond to insults with blood?" Subin shook her head slowly. "No, only when we're told we don't deserve to exist." Zakara tilted her head. "And what does that make you?" Subin looked straight into the lens. Her voice was soft but firm. "Survivors." That word echoed across the broadcast, replayed billions of times. "Survivors." To some, it sounded noble. To others, terrifying. The message. Later that evening, Djo and Subin returned to their quarters. Park Minu sat near the console, monitoring secure transmissions. His face was pale. "Message from the hegemony," he said. Djo took the datapad. The transmission was short, only 3 words, written in the harsh glyphs of the reptilian language. "We remember Velak." Subin's heart sank. "What does that mean?" Djo placed the pad down carefully, his expression unreadable. "It means they've stopped talking." Outside the window, a faint glow lit the darkness, an incoming fleet signature, distant but growing stronger. The room fell silent as the signal expanded into hundreds of red icons on the display. Park whispered, "They're mobilizing." Dezhou's voice was calm, steady, inevitable. Then the galaxy's lesson isn't over yet. The war began with silence. No speeches. No declarations. Just fleets moving through the dark between stars. The hegemony called it Operation Cleansing Flame. They claimed it was a preventive strike, an act to contain humanity before their influence corrupted the galaxy. But every admiral, every soldier, every civilian knew the truth. The hegemony was afraid, and fear had made them reckless. The first strike. At the edge of the Kepler system, a mining station blinked out of existence. One moment it was transmitting cargo data, the next gone, vaporized. Hours later, images reached Earth, a cloud of debris spinning silently against the backdrop of the stars. Over 1,000 colonists lost in the first strike. President Kang Jaimin watched the footage from her war room. Her face was cold, unreadable. Around her, ministers argued, retaliate, withdraw, negotiate. She raised one hand and the room fell silent. "They want to erase us," she said quietly. "They believe the galaxy will side with them if we fight back." She turned toward the Admiralty Council. "They've forgotten one thing." Admiral Song Bung-ho stepped forward. "That humans don't fight wars for pride." Kang nodded. "Exactly, we fight to survive, and survival is what we're best at." Admiral Song's fleet. 2 days later, 3 human fleets jumped into the frontier sector. At the head of the formation, the battleship ISS Resolute glided forward, its hull covered in angled armor, every inch built for function over form. Human ships were ugly by galactic standards, asymmetrical, scarred, patched with scavenged parts. But they worked. They always worked. Song stood on the bridge, looking at the holographic map of enemy positions. "Signal from Epsilon Command," reported his aide. "Ambassador Dezhou Ho is joining the operation." Song raised an eyebrow. "The diplomat?" "He's been reinstated, sir. Special advisor on hegemony tactics." Song smiled grimly. "Of course he has." Epsilon 7, Human Operations Center. Dezhou stood before the hollow table, surrounded by officers and analysts. The station had transformed from a diplomatic hub into a war command post. The galaxy's most infamous room, the place where Velak had died, was now a tactical nerve center. Subin entered quietly, holding a datapad. "They've begun bombing civilian colonies on the outer rim. The casualty reports are staggering." Dezhou's face was calm, but his hands clenched behind his back. "They think if they burn us fast enough, we'll surrender." "They don't understand us," Subin said softly. "No," Dezhou replied. "They don't understand what happens when you make humans angry." The Kepler Gate battle. On the frontier, the stars erupted. Hundreds of hegemony ships poured through a wormhole near the Kepler Gate, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, their formation perfect, their confidence absolute. They had studied human tactics, calculated their ship numbers, and concluded this war would be over in days. They were wrong. Humanity had never relied on superior numbers. They relied on adaptation. The first human salvo came from nowhere, invisible until impact. Electromagnetic pulses detonated in synchronized bursts, blinding enemy sensors. Then came the drones, thousands of small, fast, ugly machines, built from mining bots refitted for war. They moved like a swarm of angry insects, slipping through shields and chewing through hulls. Inside the Resolute, Admiral Song leaned over the rail. "Deploy the Kepler net." The order rippled through the fleet. From the surrounding asteroid belt, hidden emitters activated, a web of gravitic fields linking ship to ship, rock to rock, until the entire battlefield pulsed with invisible energy. The hegemony ships slowed, their faster-than-light cores overloaded. The elegant fleet that once cut through the void now stumbled, confused, trapped. "Target engines only," Song ordered. "No annihilations, cripple them." Human gunners obeyed. Beams of white-hot plasma lanced through the dark, disabling ships one by one. No mercy. No cruelty. Just precision. Within an hour, half the hegemony fleet was dead in the water. Zakara's frontline report. From the safety of her dropship, Zakara Ven, the alien journalist who had once reported on diplomacy, now covered war. "This is Zakara Ven, live from Kepler Gate," she said, her voice trembling. What we're witnessing defies every military doctrine in the galaxy. The humans, they're not fighting to destroy. They're fighting to teach. Her camera zoomed in on the drifting wrecks. Hegemony ships disabled, crews rescued, medics in human suits floating among them. They're helping survivors, she whispered, astonished. They're enemies' survivors. She turned toward her human escort, Lieutenant Park Minu, who was bandaging a wounded reptilian officer. Why, she asked, why save them? Park looked up, his voice was steady. Because if we kill them all, they'll never learn who we are. Dezhou and the captive. Later that day, Dezhou stood inside a containment chamber aboard Epsilon 7. A hegemony officer, one of Velak's subordinates, sat shackled before him. The alien's breathing was ragged, his eyes filled with hatred. Dezhou placed a glass of water on the table between them. Drink. The prisoner spat on the floor. You butchered our commander. Dezhou didn't react. He hit me first. You could have restrained him. I could have, Dezhou said calmly. But then he would have believed he could strike us again tomorrow, or next week, or next century. The alien sneered. You think killing one of us changes anything? Dezhou leaned forward slightly, voice quiet but sharp. It already has. He gestured to the screen behind him, live footage of human rescue ships towing damaged hegemony vessels. Your soldiers are alive because we let them live. That's your first lesson. The alien stared in disbelief. Lesson. Dezhou nodded. You're at war with predators who remember mercy. Be grateful for that. The human sighed. Back on Earth, the war hit home. Families watched as news feeds filled with footage of burning ships, desperate transmissions, and heroism. Human volunteers lined up in thousands, not for glory, but because survival was written into their bones. Children in schools memorized the words of President Kang's broadcast. The galaxy wanted to test our civility. They will now learn what makes us human, our compassion, our endurance, and our refusal to die quietly. Even alien refugees began flocking to human territories for protection. Worlds once hostile to Earth now broadcast desperate pleas. Send us your Deathworlders. The turning point. 3 weeks into the war, Dezhou stood aboard the Resolute, overseeing a new kind of mission, a strike not to destroy, but to demonstrate. Coordinates locked, said Subin from the tactical console. Enemy fleet regrouping in the Verdun Belt. Dezhou's eyes narrowed. Engage the shadow drones. The lights dimmed, the drones launched, vanishing into the dark. Moments later, every hegemony ship received a single message, encrypted, translated into every known language. You called us beasts. Beasts don't make peace, we do. Then one by one, the drones disabled their reactors and transmitted images of their crews. Alive, unharmed, captured, then released. No fleet had ever done that before. The capture of War Marshal Hector. The final blow came at Orion's edge. The hegemony's largest fleet surrounded a human convoy, expecting an easy slaughter. Instead, Admiral Song's fleet jumped directly behind them, outnumbered, outgunned, but perfectly positioned. The battle lasted only 2 hours. At the end, War Marshal Hector, commander of the hegemony fleets, was dragged from his burning flagship into the custody of a human boarding team. When Dezhou entered the holding cell, the reptilian officer hissed, You think you've won? Dezhou smiled faintly. No, I think you've learned. The alien glared. Learned what? That peace isn't something we beg for, Dezhou said. It's something we give. The galaxy watched in disbelief as humanity did the unthinkable, returning captured soldiers, rebuilding destroyed colonies, and even sending humanitarian aid to enemy planets. For every world that saw Earth as a threat, 2 more began to see them as something far worse and far better. A mystery, a paradox, a species that kills like a predator, but heals like a god. As the war slowed, rumors began to spread. That the hegemony wanted talks again. That Meleros had asked for peace. Subin found Dezhou alone on the viewing deck, staring out at the stars. They'll call you a monster, she said softly. They already do. Dezhou's reflection in the glass didn't smile this time. Good monsters are remembered. Outside, the stars burned quietly, witnesses to a war no one wanted, but everyone would remember. The war ended not with an explosion, but with an invitation. No treaties, no ultimatums, no fleets standing guard. Just a single encrypted message sent to every major government in the galaxy. Peace Summit, neutral ground, attendance requested. Host, Ambassador Kim Dejoho. Topic, the future of fear. The message was signed not by a general, nor a president, but by the same human diplomat whose 5 seconds had changed everything. Across the galaxy, leaders hesitated. Some called it a trap, others called it arrogance. But deep down, they all knew they had to come. Because if they didn't, humanity would still shape the future without them. Neutral ground. The summit was held on Viola Prime, a world known for its endless crystal plains and violet skies. For the first time in history, every major power sent representatives to the same place. The hegemony, the coalition, the federation, even the fringe worlds. And at the center of it all stood a circular structure of white steel and glass, the Hall of Concordance, newly built by human engineers in just 40 days. No one missed the symbolism. Humans had built peace faster than most species built a starship. Inside, the delegates gathered. The tension was suffocating. At the head of the long table stood Dejoe, dressed in his simple black uniform, unarmed, unarmored. To his right stood Lee Subin, holding the summit's data archives. To his left, Zakara Ven, the alien journalist who had chronicled the war, now acting as the summit's official witness. Opposite him sat High Archon Melaros, the reptilian ruler of the hegemony, his scales dulled and eyes weary. He had aged decades and months. Ambassador, Melaros began, his voice deep but tired. You summoned us, speak. The speech that silenced the galaxy. Dejoe nodded once, stepping forward. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and clear, a diplomat's tone, but with the weight of something far older behind it. Fear, he began, is a survival tool. On our world, it kept us alive. It taught us to hide from predators, to fight when cornered, and to adapt when nothing else could. He paused, letting the silence hang. But fear also blinded us. It made us destroy each other, long before we ever reached the stars. We learned the hard way that peace isn't the absence of fear, it's what you build after it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Melaros's eyes narrowed, studying the man who had crippled his empire with 5 seconds of motion and months of restraint. Dejoe continued. When Commander Velax struck me, he didn't just hit a human. He hit the embodiment of a truth our species had already learned. That survival and civility aren't opposites, they're twins. We can build cities with the same hands that once held weapons. We can forgive with the same hearts that once held hate. He gestured toward the screen behind him. Footage appeared, human medics tending to alien soldiers, engineers rebuilding enemy colonies, children from both species playing together on reconstructed worlds. This, he said, pointing to the image, is what makes us dangerous. Not our strength, not our speed, not even our ruthlessness. It's that we choose compassion even when the universe teaches us cruelty. The chamber fell silent. Even Melaros looked away, unable to meet the human's gaze. The Archon's question. Finally, the Archon spoke, his voice low. You say you choose peace, but your peace is built on fear. The galaxy obeys you now because they're terrified. Dejoe nodded slowly, yes. The Archon blinked, confused. You admit it. I do, Dejoe said, because fear is the only language every species understands, but it's not the only one we speak. He walked closer to the Archon, the sound of his boots echoing softly. Fear is how we start peace, he said quietly. Understanding is how we keep it. Melaros's claws flexed, and what if we refuse to understand? Dejoe's voice stayed calm, almost gentle. Then fear will remind you again. The Archon studied him for a long moment, and then, to everyone's astonishment, he let out a slow, hissing laugh. So that's what you are, he said, predators who learned restraint. Predators, Dejoe corrected softly, who learned mercy. Subin's presentation. Subin stepped forward, her voice steady but emotional. We've prepared a proposal, shared colonization rights, mutual defense treaties, open science exchanges. The alien delegates murmured, Melaros frowned. You would share your technology after all this. Subin nodded. Knowledge only works if it spreads. We don't want an empire, we want neighbors. Zakara, recording from her console, whispered softly to her translator Mike. The humans are offering peace, not as weakness, but as dominance over their own nature. The lesson. The summit stretched for hours. Arguments flared, compromises were made, and for the first time in galactic history, every major faction signed the same document. It would come to be known as the Accords of Virla, but the galaxy would remember it by another name. The lesson of fear. Zakara's official closing report captured the essence of it. The humans have proven that fear can create peace, not by crushing their enemies, but by forcing the galaxy to face itself. They are the mirror no one wanted to look into. And now no one can look away. After the summit, that night Dejo stood outside the Hall of Concordance, the violet sky stretching endlessly above. The stars shimmered, reflected in the glass planes that stretched to the horizon. Subin joined him, her footsteps soft. You did it, she said. You actually did it. Dejo shook his head. No, we only postponed what comes next. She frowned. You think they'll betray the Accords? Not all, he said, but some will. Fear fades. That's why the lesson must be repeated. Subin looked up at the stars. You make it sound like peace is just another battle. Dejo's gaze softened. It is, it always was. They stood in silence for a while, the night air cool, filled with the faint hum of distant engines as the delegates' ships departed. Melaros's realization. Inside his transport ship, the High Archon sat alone, replaying Dejo's words in his mind. For the first time in centuries, the leader of the hegemony felt something he couldn't command away, humility. He looked at the signed treaty in his claws and whispered to himself, perhaps the galaxy needed to fear something to survive what's coming. The broadcast. Days later, Zakara's final documentary aired across the galaxy. Its title, 5 Seconds of Fear, A Lesson from Earth. The opening line became immortal. In 5 seconds, a human diplomat taught the galaxy to fear. In 5 months, he taught them why they should respect that fear. The closing shot was simple. Dejo standing under the violet sky, looking up at the stars, whispering words that millions would quote for generations. Fear doesn't make us monsters, it makes us careful. And careful species survive. The war was over. The treaties were signed. And for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy was quiet. But the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the pause before a storm. The new galaxy. Months passed. Trade routes reopened, colonies were rebuilt, and the word human began to mean something new, something that didn't quite fit in the old lexicons of fear or friendship. In the cities of the hegemony, alien children played with human-made toys. On frontier stations, soldiers from once rival empires stood guard together, their uniforms marked with a small silver symbol, 2 hands clasped beneath a single star. It became the emblem of the Virla Accords, the peace humans had built through the shadow of fear. Zakara Ven's documentary continued to spread, its opening line whispered like prayer across 1,000 worlds. In 5 seconds they taught us fear. In 5 months they taught us peace. The galaxy had never been so united. And yet beneath that unity, unease stirred. Because everyone knew, humanity's calm was never the absence of danger. It was the eye of it. Earth. In New Seoul, President Kang Jae-min stood on a balcony overlooking the rebuilt skyline. The dawn light spilled over chrome towers and floating gardens, the air alive with the hum of transport drones. Behind her, an aide approached. Madam President, the hegemony delegation requests a formal embassy in Earth orbit. Kang smiled faintly. A hegemony station orbiting Earth, who would have thought? They say they wish to ensure peace. Of course they do, she said. Fear is the strongest foundation for diplomacy. She turned toward the horizon, watching the sunlight glint off the oceans. But foundations can crack. Make sure we build something stronger before it does. Dejo's return. Far from the political halls, Ambassador Kim Dejo-ho finally returned home. The shuttle descended through layers of atmosphere, cutting through clouds that glowed like molten silver. Below lay a world that had tried to kill its own children for millions of years, and somehow made them stronger. When Dejo stepped out onto solid ground, he felt the gravity differently, heavier but familiar, like an old friend's embrace. He stood on a cliff overlooking a vast ocean, wind tugging at his uniform. The sound of crashing waves reminded him of 1,000 battles, 1,000 storms, and one unforgettable meeting that had changed the stars forever. He thought about Velak about that moment, the strike, the silence, how a single act of violence had built the foundation of a new order. And yet it haunted him. Subin's words echoed in his mind. You make it sound like peace is just another battle. He sighed, because it is, he whispered to the wind. Zakara's visit. A transport touched down behind him. From it emerged Zakara Ven, now a legend in her own right. Her once silver eyes were darker now, aged by everything she'd seen. You've become a myth, she said softly, approaching him. Half the galaxy calls you a hero, the other half calls you a warning. Dejo smiled faintly. That sounds about right. She stepped beside him, looking out at the horizon. Do you regret it? He didn't answer immediately. His gaze stayed on the sea. I regret that they only understand peace after seeing blood, he said quietly. But maybe that's just how sentience works. We all need fear to remind us what's precious. Zakara nodded, her mandibles clicking thoughtfully. And what happens when the galaxy stops fearing you? Dejo turned his head slightly, meeting her gaze. Then I hope they've learned enough not to need to. She studied him for a long moment, then asked, and if they haven't? Dejo's eyes drifted toward the distant sky, where ships streaked through the stratosphere like fireflies. Then, he said, we'll remind them. The signal. 3 months later. In the depths of outer veil space, an automated relay station, abandoned for decades, suddenly blinked to life. Its long-dead sensors caught something faint, something that shouldn't exist, a signal. Not from any known civilization. Not even from the mapped galaxy. A transmission encoded in prime number intervals. A pattern older than the stars themselves. The AI aboard the station did what it was programmed to do. It sent the message onward, straight to the nearest active human listening post. The message contained only 4 words. We heard your war. Melaros' warning. In the hegemony's capital, High Archon Melaros sat in darkness, staring at the latest intelligence report. The message had reached his desk within hours of human interception. The analysis was clear. The source came from beyond the Perseus Veil, a region thought empty since the dawn of galactic history. He summoned his war council. They spoke in hushed tones. Could it be one of ours? No, the energy signature is ancient. Then what answers a signal like that? Melaros' claws tapped the arm of his chair. He remembered Dejo's words on Viola Prime. Fear is how peace begins. Maybe he thought fear was also how it ended. He activated a private channel, his voice low and rough. Send this to the humans directly, mark it urgent. The message reached Earth 12 hours later. They're coming, and this time they are not afraid of you. The Council of the Accords. A new emergency summit was called, the first under the banner of the Viola Accords. Humanity now sat not as guests, but as leaders. Admiral Song, President Kang, Subin, Zakara, and Dejo gathered in the Grand Chamber on Epsilon 7, now fully rebuilt, the very place where it had all begun. The lights dimmed as the transmission replayed. The alien voice was unlike anything they had ever heard, distorted, resonant, more vibration than sound. We heard your war. We watched your peace. You are not the only predators. The room fell silent. Subin swallowed hard. What do they want? Dejo's face remained calm, but his voice had that same quiet edge the galaxy had learned to fear. They want to see if we've learned our lesson. President Kang leaned forward. Then we show them. Dejo nodded. We will together. The final broadcast. Weeks later, Zakara Ven released her final transmission. It was short, poetic, and destined to be remembered for centuries. Fear taught us respect. Respect gave us peace. And peace has given us time. Time to prepare. Her voice faded as the image cut to a fleet rising over Earth's atmosphere. Not a fleet of conquerors, but of guardians. Human ships, alien ships, united under one symbol, the silver hands of the Viola Accords. At the center of the formation stood the ISS Resolute, its hull newly inscribed with a phrase in hundreds of languages. Peace through fear, survival through unity. Dejo watched from the command deck, the stars glinting against the hull. Subin stood beside him. Outside, space stretched endlessly, vast, cold, waiting. She asked quietly, "Do you think they'll come soon?" Dejo's voice was steady. "They already have." He looked out into the infinite dark, eyes calm and knowing. "Let them come. The galaxy learned to fear us once. Let's see what happens when fear stands with us. The galaxy learned to fear humanity. But what comes next will learn to fear what humanity has become."